Hello, I'm Janna, and welcome back to the Crafty Corner. Today, we're going to be playing with the brand new Ranger Tim Holtz alcohol inks and investigating the new stamp release. If you'd like to see exactly which supplies we're going to be using, go ahead and pause here. All right, let's head over to the Crafty Corner. So today is very exciting. I had a whole bunch of wonderful new products come in. So today we're going to be doing a bit of play with the brand new alcohol inks and the brand new Tim Holtz stamps. So let's take a look at the 10 new colors of alcohol ink first. First one up is Cosmopolitan. This one is kind of making me think of a cross between cotton candy and a pink flamingo. Absolutely gorgeous, and that will be fun to create with. Then we've got Brick, which definitely is reminiscent of the distress color Fired Brick. Then we have a little nod to some rustic wilderness with Wilderness. Nice bold green. Then we have Yonder. Yonder might be one of my top 3 favorite colors from the new set. I am loving that blue quite a bit. Then we move on to Bayou, another lovely blue. After that, we have Juniper. Now, this one is a returning favorite, and I am so happy to see this back. After that, we have Chronicle. This one is kind of reminiscent of old paper and has some very interesting color breakdown that we will look at later. After that, we've got Flannel. And then we have Gravel. This is a lovely dark gray. That would be a great neutral to play with. And last but not least, we have Smudge. Now, Smudge, I can guarantee you it's going to become a new fan favorite. It's definitely got some vibes like Mushroom did, and it is perfect for aging things up and getting that old distressed look, especially on metal elements. So these would be the brand new alcohol inks. We'll set those aside briefly since we're talking about new things, and we'll come back in a little bit for a play with the alcohol inks. Since we've got some more, we've also got stamps, and we have 7 new sets to love and enjoy. So the first one here is Sign Painter. Now, if you take a look, we got some fantastic lines in here, and I can definitely see myself making lots of custom card fronts with you. I think that'd be great to stamp them, emboss them, maybe get into a little bit of glaze, and create custom sentiments on cards. Next, this one, if you remember Glorious Bouquet, then this will have a familiar vibe. Look at all the detail. I can't wait to do some watercolor painting with these. Maybe some layered stamping with some distress paint as well. This is Floristry, and this is 485, and it comes with some fantastic sentiments. We've got hello friend, happy birthday, thanks so much, best wishes, best day ever, just because, miss you, congrats, and love you. Then we're getting into embroidery. I love these florals, and again, I can't wait to color these. There's so much open space, and that'll be so fun to customize these with colors. I'm already thinking watercolor pencil, maybe some distress crayon. Moving right along, we have this set, and that should look also familiar because these are some elements from that wonderful collage paper Botanical. This is French Garden, and again, we've got so much lovely detail, lots of open space. Can't wait to color these as well. Now we get into some things that are a little bit more grunge and a little bit more, how should we say, maybe eccentric. Over here, we have got Tidbits. Fantastic. These remind me so much of Ideology Ephemera. Now I can stamp out my favorite sections. We've got a really cool pointy finger here. We've got some postal marks. We've got some little check boxes indicating passport for travel abroad. I love that. And this will be some wonderful fill-in-the-blank stamps. Then this one is definitely going to be a favorite of mine because we're getting into some industrial grunge. We've got Deconstructed. We've got a fantastic keyboard, and we've got some cool numbers, and we've got this. Definitely looking like a color wheel, but I can see that could be easily something we put in a background with some visual interest. And we've got all sorts of numbers. This might be some sort of graph over here. Of course, we've got a wonderful arrow to play with too. And I love that. this side up. So this is deconstructed. Can't wait to make backgrounds. And last but not least, this one I found super surprising, but again, I think this has so much potential for backgrounds. This one is Hodgepodge. It is an absolutely enormous stamp, and that is going to be so fun to create with. And we've got really, really cool hidden things on here. I really like that little clock up here. It reminds me of a cuckoo clock. We've got a cool little dragonfly. There's a crown in here. I really want to cut out a few of those. Those are cool. We've got a fish, that awesome seahorse, and we've got a little racehorse down here, a moth. Oh, I didn't see that dog before. That's awesome. So lots of collage type pieces to use, and I can't wait to try a background with this. I'm thinking lift ink, or maybe just stamping right over some alcohol inked paper. Either way, tons of fantastic stuff. So let's set these things aside and dive in with a bit of alcohol play before we get into some stamped fun. To create some backgrounds, we're going to be starting with some alcohol ink Duralar. Now, Duralar is a unique substrate that is completely transparent, and better yet, it's heat stable as well. So that means that we will be able to emboss on this. Now, I'm just going to take off the protective paper, and as you can see, it's a fairly thick piece of plastic, and when we put alcohol inks on it, it's going to be completely see-through. So we're going to take these two sheets and I'm going to cut them in half. My thought at this moment is that we're going to be creating a set of 4 alcohol inked cards with some embossed elements. So we're just going to take these and we're going to cut them down to roughly 3.5 inches. That will give us 2 panels for the front of our card. So there we go. We've got our first set. Now let's go in and cut that second one up. And again, the measurement I'm using is at 3.5 inches. Okay, and we sliced and diced these using our mini tonic trimmer. Now let's pull in some fun colors to use. The main thing I want to do is focus on the color and to see how the colors break down and form these really interesting gradients and patterns. To help myself see things a little bit better, I'm putting down a piece of scrap paper first. That way I can tell exactly where the ink is traveling. I will also be using the Tim Holtz Ranger ink blowing tool and probably a dash of isopropyl, and this is going to be 91%. I will also be pulling in some blending solution as well. So for our first color, we're going to be using some Yonder. This is one of the beautiful blue colors, and Yonder is definitely one of my new favorites. I love all things in blue. And we're just going to take a bit of the blending solution, put that on there, and then we'll start moving things around carefully with the ink blowing tool. The main thing to remember is to use little puffs of air. If we use larger puffs of air, the ink is going to go everywhere, and this will have the tendency to end up looking like tie-dye. So little puffs of air to get our ink moving. All right, so we're going to work with those little bits of air and just get some good coverage and try to get some inky flow going. Ooh, I am loving Yonder. That blue is just so vibrant. This is a fantastic addition to the alcohol ink collection. So we're just moving things all over. I want to cover as much of the base as possible, and we'll do that by spreading that ink out a bit more. You know what, while we're here, I think a bit of juniper would also blend in very nicely. So let's take that and we'll spread that around. Just continuing with those little puffs of air, trying to get our inky flow going. There we go. Starting to get some good flow, getting some texture on there. Ooh, I love how juniper is contrasting so beautifully with Yonder. That's working out very, very good. So we've got some more juniper down, and again, just going in with some more air, just trying to get that ink everywhere on here. I want to have a lovely background that I will be able to stamp over once this is dry. So a little bit more blending solution on the side. And we'll just go in. I'm trying to pull that ink over to the edge just so that we have that good coverage I'm looking for. Okay, and we are getting pretty close to a good spot. And again, I am just really enjoying the colors that have been added to the line. All right, I am happy with the background. Let's take a look. We picked it up. It's all nice and see-through, a bit glossy. Let's go ahead and put the next bits on fast forward. Next, we're going to be doing a drip technique. Here I'm pulling in a piece of Yupo paper and we're going to be adding some alcohol inks to this. First, we're going to add some pink Cosmopolitan. I'm just kind of running that down. Then we're going to go in with a dash of brick. That'll be a lovely dark red. Just kind of scribbling that on. Then I'm going to jump to Dandelion. That's going to be our vibrant yellow. Next, we're going to be pulling in some Mojito. That'll be our lovely green. Then we'll go in with a bit of Yonder for our blue. And the last color is going to be a dash of Vineyard. And that will give us our purple. So with these inks on here, I'm going to be tipping the Yupo paper up on its side. I'm just going to kind of prop that up against one of the bottles, and I'll use a piece of paper towel to catch the ink. As you can see, the ink is already dripping down the Yupo paper. I'm now going to go in and spritz with 91% isopropyl alcohol to get this to move and flow. But before that, I'm just touching up a couple of inks that I think need a little bit more color. So we're just going to go in, make a couple of alterations, and then we will spritz. Okay, so we've already got a lovely blend going, but I want the isopropyl to help move things along. And as you can see, it is starting to drip. If you also notice, we're getting a little bit of beading today. That is because the humidity here in Quebec is sky high at 94%. But that's okay. The alcohol inks are still going to move, but they're just going to need a little help with a bit of air. Off to the side, I'm kind of adding a few puffs of air with the ink blower tool just to spread things around so we get that beautiful drip drop technique. And I'll just add a little bit more of that rubbing alcohol, and that's going to give us some more flow. As you can see, we've got some really interesting striations going on. Really enjoying that. But as I'm adding some air with the air blower tool, we're getting a more solid shape forming. I'm really enjoying how this is turning out. It's so flowy and fun. So this is going to make one of our backgrounds. Now, let's take this. We've got our rainbow gradient, and we're going to be doing some stamping with lift ink. And the stamp set that we're going to be pulling in will be CMS 490. And that is the stamp set hodgepodge. So we're going to be taking our ink, and since this is a very big stamp taking up an entire sheet, I'm just going to put the ink directly on the stamp. I'm not going to mount it on a acrylic block or anything. We can work right off the sheet. So a little bit of a twist, a little bit of a push, and we will have our lift ink. The easiest way to tell if you've got ink is to give your stamp a little tilt to the side and make sure it's shiny. Now, I'm lining this up carefully along my substrate. And I wanted to make sure that I inked mostly on the right-hand side because I love that little motif with the fish and the seahorse. And I really wanted to include that in the lift. So, bit of good firm pressure. And now we will pull that Yupo paper off. And here we go. So you can definitely tell they have some lift going on, and we can see that we've got some ink here on the stamp. We're going to get a second print, and I'm going to be pulling in another substrate. This is Ranger Alcohol Ink cardstock, and it's super, super glossy, so that substrate is going to just draw the ink right into it. So let's place it down on our stamp. And again, we'll apply some good firm pressure. I'm just going to rub the back a little bit to make sure we have some good transfer. And then we will take a look at our bonus print. This should be good. I do love a rainbow stamped effect. And check it out. Perfect print, great detail, lovely color. That will be a fun background to use at a later date. All right. So we can set the stamp set aside for now. I'm going to just quickly rub off any of the extra ink, and we'll move on to the lift process of the main panel. So what we're going to need will include some paper towels, and I love using blue shop towels. I found those to be very absorbent and have very low texture, so it's perfect for taking off lifting. I'm just going to tear myself a piece, and first I'm going to just press and dab to lift off any of the lifting that is still wet, because if we start rubbing this right away, then we're going to smear our entire image. Now, when you're dabbing, if you keep checking the paper towel and if you keep seeing some color coming onto it, then you know that you need to keep dabbing. Once the color starts to stay on the paper and doesn't come off on the paper towel, that's when we can start doing some small slow motion rubbing circles on the substrate. But the main thing is to dab and get the extra color off first. So I'm just working my way around the card, folding the paper towel over when one side gets a little bit too dirty, and just pressing and dabbing. As you can see, the image is slowly starting to come into focus. And once we start the gentle circles, we will be able to see all the lovely detail that the lift ink has given us. Okay, I think we've just about got it. Now I'm taking a clean paper towel, double checking that I've got the majority of the lift ink off, and now we can start rubbing and doing the small circles on the substrate. Let's see here. Let's zoom a little bit closer because I really want to focus in on all that wonderful detail. So we'll just keep making our small circles until our image comes completely in focus. Now let's go ahead and take a closer look. Ooh, and check out the detail. I love that. That's going to be such a fun background to play with. All right, now we're going to be bringing our clear panels back, and we're going to be attaching these to a base of Distress White Heavy cardstock. So we've got 4 panels. We've got kind of a pink one, a blue one, a green blue, and a yellow. Now we're going to be pulling in CMS 487 French Garden to do a bit of embossing. And I'm going to be pulling in the Ranger Black Fine Powder Embossing. So now we need to get our bases ready. I've got a stack of the Distress White Heavy stock, and we will be attaching each of the Duralar panels to the front of these with the Tim Holtz Ideology Tiny Attacher. I think stapling is going to be the easiest because if we use a wet adhesive, we're going to get some interesting markings when it dries. So the staples will give us the most clarity when we attach. Now I'm also going to be trimming these down just a little bit. I want to have these marked in at about 4.5 inches. So I'm just taking the die pick tool and making myself a little mark, and then I will trim these down with a tiny trimmer. So we'll just take the tiny trimmer, line these two up, and cut off the extra bits. There we go. Nice and easy. So I'm going to do the same thing with the other two pieces. Just kind of lining that up. And I will need to make a mark again. There we go. And now I can cut that. So stacking two more panels together, lining them up, holding that firm, and then slicing. Good. These are now ready to attach. Let's bring in the card panels and the tiny attacher. So we'll be able to staple these to the front. Love the tiny attacher. It is by Tim Holt and Ideology. So let's go ahead and line up our pieces. I'm trying to center that the best I can just by eye. Ooh, the pattern is really popping now so that it's over white. That is cool. All right, so I think that looks pretty good. I've got my lineup. So now I just need to staple this in place, and we'll do the same thing with the other three panels. Right now I'm kind of thinking I want to do one staple at each side. These are super small, so they'll be easy to kind of camouflage. All right, and one more. There, now we have all four corners. We've got three more panels to do. So again, I'll line things up and we'll go in with the tiny attacher and staple things down. Now that all of these are stapled together, it is time to start thinking about embossing. And I love the colors. So some of these are a little bit sticky, and to alleviate the stickiness, I'm going in with an anti-static pouch just to tap on these and to make sure that nothing is going to stick, because we only want the embossing powder sticking to the embossing ink. Now, let's go ahead and take some of those French garden flowers and put them on a stamping block. We're then going to go in with some embossing ink. I'm using the embossing dabber to apply the ink to our lovely stamp. So I'm just going to take the embossing ink and we're just going to dab that all over the flower stamp. And then we'll be able to stamp that down and get our first image. Now, again, the Duralar is heat resistant. So that will allow us to do embossing over alcohol ink. This card set, I'm kind of going for a very simple look. I wanted to do a big pop of color, and then I wanted to do some embossing with a plain black. I want the detail of the stamps to kind of be the star of the show here. All right, good firm pressure and lift. There we go. So we can see the shine. That means we have got ink. Now I'll just take a piece of scrap paper, we'll tuck that under here, and we will add our embossing powder. I'm just going to sprinkle this very generously over our card front, tip that, give it a little tap, and look at that gorgeous detail. For the moment, we will set that panel aside as I put the extra powder back into the jar. Now we're going to do the same thing with a few other stamps, and then we will get to embossing. Time for our second panel. This time we're going to be pulling in the panel done with Juniper and Yonder. Let's bring in another stamp. We're going to go for this larger flower. So again, we're going to be inking up with Distress Embossing ink using the embossing dabber. You definitely could use the ink pad. I just happen to like the dabber because I found it to be a bit juicier and easier to apply quickly. All right, stamp is shiny. That means we've got ink. Let's go ahead, stamp that down, and then add our embossing powder. Good firm pressure, and lift. All right. Well, let's go ahead and add that black powder. There we go. Tap it off, and there we go. Beautiful, beautiful detail. So we'll set that one off to the side, and let's move on to panel number 3 after we dump that powder right back into the jar. Good. Set that off to the side, and now our yellow panel. This was done with a dash of Chronicle and some dandelion. So this time we're going to be using the stamp that kind of looks like a sunflower. And we'll just go ahead and tap on the embossing ink and then stamp it out. Okay, stamping this down right there. Good firm pressure and lift. Time for the embossing powder. Pour, tap. Lovely, lovely detail. And now we'll be able to set that aside as we put that extra powder right back into the jar. Let's go ahead and bring in our next panel. This one is done with Wilderness and a touch of Laguna. So we've got some lovely leaves that we're going to be stamping and a clump of berries. So let's go ahead, mount the leaves on the stamping block, add our ink, and then see what we get. Now, this stamp has a lot of detail, but it's pretty closed. I'm not sure how clearly it's going to show up, but even if it isn't with perfect definition, we're going to have a great silhouette to work with. All right, let's go ahead, switch our stamps out. I'm going to get that little clump of berries, and we'll stamp that as well before adding our embossing powder. Okay, stamping it down. Oh, that's lovely. The detail on the stamp set is absolutely phenomenal. Okay, we've got our stamping done. We've got our paper. Dumping the embossing powder. Let's see what we got. So, it looks like the leaves are pretty solid. But you know what? I love the shadow effect of this. So we're just going to roll with it. All right, setting that aside for a moment, putting our embossing powder back, and now we get to emboss. Let's put this on fast forward. Here is the finished embossing, and look at that beautiful shine. And our substrate didn't warp at all, which is the whole point of using the Duralar. Loving the effect, and that we've got a set of unique cards. All right, so these cards aren't done yet. We're going to need to add a sentiment to these. And for sentiments, I decided to pull in some of the label stickers from Ideology. Let's see here. We're going to pick 4 of these, and our first one is going to be Best Day Ever. I'm going to put that over the bottom staple and kind of have it hanging off a little bit on the card. So there we go, sentiment number 1. Moving on to number 2, let's pull the sentiment, love you. And again, I'm going to put this one over the bottom right staple. Now, for the other 2, we're going to be placing these stickers over the bottom left staple. So we have got Sending Thanks. And for the next one, let's go with Best Wishes. And we'll place that again on the bottom left. So there we go. We have got a set of 4 cards using the same technique, and then mixing and matching some different sentiments from the Ideology label sticker set. I love the stamping detail and I love the alcohol ink play and colors. So fun making a set of coordinating cards. So that would be section 1 of card making with some of our lovely new supplies, including the alcohol inks and the French Garden stamp set. Now, let's pull back in our background where we used the drippy technique and lift ink. So we've got a bright, beautiful background. Now we need to start building. And to do that, we're going to be using some of the Distress Black Heavy Stock paper. We are now going to be pulling in the stamp set embroidery. This is CMS 486. And I want to use the tall winding floral with lots of space because this is going to give us a great area to paint in. So we're going to pick up the stamp and I'm going to do a light outline using a little bit of Distress Oxide. Now what I had nearest me was some Distress Oxide spray. So I've spritzed it a little bit off to the side and then used it to stamp the image. Now we're going to be layering the stamping. We've got our base image, which I'm using as a guideline as I fill in all of the different portions of the flower. And then I'm layering with the paint so that our design will be more dimensional. To paint, I've been using one of the Tim Holtz water brushes. After we've painted, I'm going to go back in, stamp again, and we're going to do a final layer of white embossing. And here is the embossing. Beautiful white by Ranger. So we stamped it, we embossed it, and now we're trimming it down with the tiny trimmer. So just lining things up. And there we go. We now have a lovely panel that has been painted and embossed. So we're going to be using that on the front of the card. So that's going to stack like that right here. The white really does make that pop. I am quite happy with this. And we're going to put that panel on with some foam squares. These are from Simon Says Stamp, and I love that these give cards some added dimension when used in layers. Let's go ahead and get those backings off, and then we can add this to our lift inked card base. All right, so we'll just take that and I'm going to center it as best I can on the inky base. So just taking that, lining it up, and we've got some great lift with our foam. That white embossing really does pop. I'm so happy that I decided to use some black for it. All right, so that part is now done. The next thing that we are going to want to do will be to bring in some metallic droplets. I want to place these at all 4 corners for a little bit of added shine. Just going to put a little bit of collage medium, a small dot in each corner, and then I think I'm going to look for some gold droplets to add. So, small drop of collage medium. And now searching for some of these small little dots. Okay, that's 3. 1 more. There we go. That gives us 5. So just move that off to the side. And let's add our droplets to the 4 corners. We've got lots of contrast going on. We've got the paint layers on black heavy distress stock, and then we've got that beautiful rainbow gradient from the inks in the background. Absolutely love it. So finishing up putting those droplets on here for our little bit of added sparkle. We can now finish up the card and choose a sentiment for it. So for sentiment, we are going to be pulling in the Tim Holtz Metallic Ideology sticker book. The sentiment that we're going to be using is "The impossible is often the untried." I like that. It's a very optimistic sentiment. So I'm going to put this right down at the bottom. I'm going to center it as best we can. And that will wrap up our card making. There we go. Ooh, love it. So here is our finished card using the alcohol lift ink along with the beautiful embroidery stamp set that we used distress paint with. In addition to playing with lifting today, we also made a set of 4 cards featuring the new Tim Holtz Ranger alcohol inks. Over those lovely inks, we embossed on Duralar, which is a heat-stable substrate. Thank you so much for joining me here today at the Crafty Corner for some fun with embossing, lifting, alcohol ink play, and distress paints, as well as exploring the brand new stamps from Tim Holt and Stampers Anonymous. Thank you so much for joining me here today, and until next time, happy crafting!